The mall bathroom smelled like industrial bleach and someone's desperation. I was washing my hands with paper towels that fell apart before I could dry them properly, the kind of small cruelty the world specializes in, when I heard the children. 2 of them, a boy and a girl, maybe 6 years old, arguing in rapid Italian about which direction led to the food court. I don't speak Italian. I haven't spoken much of anything in 3 months. What I mean is, I wasn't the kind of person who could help lost children. I was the kind of person who'd been sleeping in a shelter 3 blocks from here, who owned exactly 2 pairs of shoes, who'd learned to make herself invisible. I was 32 years old and had somehow become the kind of woman people looked through. But these kids, their clothes were too expensive, too tailored. They wore matching silver bracelets that caught the fluorescent light like tiny mirrors, and they were scared I could hear it beneath the arguing. That particular pitch to a child's voice when they realize the adult isn't coming back. I followed them out. The mall was Friday evening chaos. The kind of place that had stopped feeling real to me months ago. Shops bleeding neon. A fountain with coins nobody wanted. Teenagers in clusters, their laughter sharp and permanent. I watched the children move through the crowd. The girl's hand gripping the boy's wrist. Both of them turning in circles. "Excuse me," the girl said to a security guard who walked past her. "Excuse me, we're looking for..." He didn't even slow down. Something in my chest twisted. Not my problem, not my responsibility. I had exactly $47 and needed to eat today, but I followed them anyway. Down the north corridor, past the jewelry store where I used to work, past the woman at the makeup counter who'd fired me for appearance concerns, which meant I'd started showing up with dark circles and wearing the same black sweater 3 days in a row. The boy stopped. He grabbed his sister's arm. "Luca said we should go to the bookstore. That's where they're supposed to find us if we get lost." "Luca's not here, Marco. Papa is supposed to be here." The way she said it, Papa, with such absolute certainty that he would come. That certainty was the most devastating thing I'd ever heard. I didn't remember deciding to approach them. My body just did it. Years of service, industry training, I guess. Years of knowing how to make children feel safe. "Hi," I said, and my voice came out strange, unused. The girl studied me, actually looked at me, unlike the guard. Her eyes were dark brown, almost black, with long lashes. She had the kind of face that would destroy people when she grew up. "Our father," she said. "He was meeting us at the juice bar, but then we went to the bathroom, and when we came back, he was gone," the boy finished. I knelt down. This was stupid. This was how you got arrested. But I knelt anyway. "What's his name?" "Salvatore," the girl said. "Salvatore Russo." The way she said it with such perfect Italian pronunciation. Such pride made me think this name meant something. That somewhere in this mall, there was a man named Salvatore Russo who was supposed to be here, who had somehow lost 2 expensive children and not come looking. "Okay," I said. "I'm going to help you find him. My name is Elena." The girl extended her small hand. "I'm Julia. This is my brother Marco." Her handshake was formal, practiced, like she'd been taught the correct way to shake hands before she'd learned to ride a bike. That's when I noticed the man. He was standing 30 feet away, near the entrance to the men's restroom. Tall, dark hair turning silver at the temples, expensive wool coat that probably cost more than I'd made in the last 6 months, and his face was wrong. Not ugly. Beautiful, actually, in a way that made your stomach drop. But his expression was the expression of someone watching a crime scene. Someone watching something break. He was staring at Julia and Marco. And then, his eyes moved to me. I've been invisible for so long that I've forgotten what it feels like to be seen. This was different. This was being photographed. Catalogued. This was a look that said, "I will remember you." This was a look that said, "Something about you is now permanent in my mind." "Papa!" Marco screamed, and the spell shattered. The man moved. Fast. He crossed the mall floor in maybe 10 seconds, and people stepped out of his way without knowing why. There was something in his movement, in the way his body occupied space, that made the crowd part like water. He dropped to his knees in front of his children. "Marco. Julia." His voice was low, controlled. But his hands shook as he pulled them close. "Mi dispiace. Mi dispiace. Mi dispiace. Mi dispiace." "We're okay, Papa," Julia said, petting his hair like he was the child. The woman helped us. He didn't look at me immediately. He held his children like they might dissolve. Like if he let go, they'd become vapor. I watched his shoulders shake, just slightly, in a way that suggested he was a man who rarely allowed himself to break. And even now, breaking in public was a kind of violence. When he finally looked up at me, his eyes were wet. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I should have left then. That would have been the smart thing, but I was frozen. Caught in that look the way a moth gets caught in glass. "You're welcome," I said. And then I'm still not sure why I added, "They're beautiful children. You should hold on to them tighter." The words came out wrong. Judgmental. Like I knew anything about his life. Like I wasn't a homeless woman in a mall at 6 on a Friday evening with no right to give anyone advice. His jaw tightened. That wet softness in his eyes froze over, turned to something sharp. "I intend to," he said. 3 security guards were walking toward us now. I could see them in my peripheral vision, moving with purpose. They probably had reports of children wandering alone. This man, Salvatore Russo, probably had 3 people already making phone calls. "I should go," I said, but Julia grabbed my hand. "What's your name?" she asked again. "Your real name?" "Elena," I said. "Elena Rossi." "Elena Rossi," she repeated. And then she said something in Italian to her father, rapid fire and certain. Something that made him close his eyes for just a moment. Something that changed his expression into something I couldn't read. "Come with us," Salvatore said quietly. Not a request, not quite a command, something in between. "I can't." "You can," he said. And then, lower, for only me to hear. "You just did something for my children. Let me do something for you." There was danger in that sentence. I could taste it. The same instinct that had made me follow these children through the mall was screaming at me now. This man, this look, this was the moment where everything broke open. This was the moment I should have said no. "Okay," I heard myself say. The car was black, impossibly black. The kind of black that looked like it was absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Salvatore didn't drive. There was a driver. A man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow who didn't speak and didn't make eye contact in the rearview mirror. I sat in the back seat between Julia and Marco, who were now engaged in an intense debate about whether the pasta at home was better than the pasta at their grandmother's house. "Nana uses too much garlic," Marco was saying. "Papa uses too much salt," Julia countered. Salvatore sat across from me, on the jump seat that faced backward. He was watching me like I was a puzzle he was trying to solve. "Where do you live, Elena Rossi?" he asked. The question was simple, innocent, but nothing about the way he asked it was innocent. "Around," I said. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." He didn't push. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small notebook. Leather-bound, expensive. He wrote something in it without looking away from me, his eyes never leaving my face. "What are you writing?" I asked. "Details I don't want to forget." My mouth went dry. Julia was watching this exchange with the concentration of a chess player. There was something too old in her eyes, something that had seen things children shouldn't see. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Home," Salvatore said. "You're going to have dinner with us." "I don't." "You do." He closed the notebook. "Julia and Marco have decided you're part of the family now. In my house, when my children have decided something, it becomes true." This should have terrified me. Instead, it made my breath catch. The car pulled away from the mall, and the city became a blur of streetlights and rain. It had started raining while we were inside. The kind of cold, persistent rain that makes you feel like the world is slowly drowning. "What do you do, Elena?" Salvatore asked. The question hung in the air between us like something alive. "I don't work right now," I said carefully. "Before. Retail. Customer service. Nothing important." "Everything you've done is important," he said quietly. "You found my children when I couldn't find them. You did that." I thought about asking how he'd lost them in the first place. How a man who clearly had resources and people and power could misplace 2 children in a mall. But I sensed that question would cost something. The drive took 20 minutes, but it felt longer. Or shorter. Time was doing something strange in this car. The rain drummed against the windows. Marco fell asleep against my shoulder, his small hand gripping my jacket. Julia watched the city pass by with an expression that suggested she'd seen this route 100 times and would see it 100 times more. "Are they always so serious?" I asked, trying to change the direction of the conversation. "They've learned to be," Salvatore said. And there it was, that crack in his voice, that tiny fracture that suggested a much longer story. "Their mother died 2 years ago. I've tried to give them normal childhoods, but..." He stopped. "But?" I prompted. "But my life doesn't permit normal," It was the first real thing he'd said to me. The first piece of truth that felt unguarded. I understood then, not completely, but enough that I was looking at a man whose entire existence was a negotiation between who he was and who he wanted to be for these children. And it was killing him. The effort of it was visible in the tightness around his eyes. The mansion appeared suddenly, rising up from the darkness like something from another century. Lights blazed from every window. Stone walls, iron gates, a driveway that curved like a question mark, multiple cars parked in careful rows, people moving behind the lit windows with purpose. This wasn't a home. This was a fortress. "Welcome to my world," Salvatore said quietly, and I heard the warning in it. The last chance to leave. But Marco was sleeping on my shoulder. The car stopped. The driver opened the door. Salvatore exited first, then extended his hand to help me out. His palm was warm, calloused, the hand of a man who'd done physical work, though I suspected he hadn't in a very long time. "Come," he said. The interior of the mansion was exactly as opulent and cold as the exterior suggested. Marble floors, a grand staircase, paintings of men in old-fashioned clothes watching with judging eyes. Salvatore guided me through hallways that smelled like lemon oil and something else, something metallic, something that made my nervous system twitch. "Papa has to work," Julia said matter-of-factly as we walked. "That's why he wasn't at the mall. Something happened. Something bad." "Julia," Salvatore said quietly. "Elena should know," Julia said. "If she's going to be here, she should know that things happen. Bad things." She said it like she was explaining the weather. Like bad things were just part of the climate of this house. "What kind of bad things?" I asked. No one answered. We reached the kitchen. It was enormous, professional-grade appliances. A chef was already at work, a man with kind eyes and a mustache who greeted Salvatore in Italian, his voice dropping into something respectful, almost reverent. "Elena will be joining us for dinner," Salvatore said in English, "for my benefit." The chef's eyebrows rose slightly. It was the first micro-expression I'd seen anyone in this house give. Everyone else was controlled, carefully managed. "Of course, signore," the chef said, and began adjusting his preparations. Salvatore guided me to a sitting room off the kitchen. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked, a garden I couldn't see in the darkness. A fire was crackling in the fireplace. Everything was soft leather and expensive wood, and the kind of comfort that felt like a trap. "Sit," he said, and I sat. He sat across from me. Close enough that I could see the exhaustion beneath his expensive exterior. Close enough that I could see the faint scar on his left temple, mostly hidden by his hair. "You're wondering who I am," he said. "I think I know who you are," I said carefully. "Do you? You're someone important, someone people are afraid of. Someone who—" I stopped. "Someone who what?" "Someone who has blood on his hands." He didn't deny it. That was when I knew it was true. That was when the panic should have started. That was when I should have run. But Marco was still asleep in the other room, his small hand having finally released my jacket. And Salvatore was looking at me like I was the first true thing he'd seen in years. "Yes," he said quietly. "I am." Dinner was served at 8. The dining room was longer than some apartments I'd lived in. A table stretched down the middle like a runway. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead, casting light that made everything look slightly unreal. At one end of the table, Salvatore. At the other end, me. Julia and Marco sat between us, acting as a buffer. "Elena used to work in retail," Salvatore announced to the table, and I realized with a start that there were other people here. Men I hadn't heard arrive, men sitting in the shadows at the edges of the room, eating quietly, watching. "Which store?" one of them asked. His accent was thick. His smile was not kind. "Why does it matter?" I asked. "Everything matters," he said. "Salvatore doesn't bring strangers to his table unless they matter." "I found his children at the mall," I said. "That's all." "Is that all?" The man smiled wider. "Or is that just the beginning?" "Enough," Salvatore said quietly, and the man stopped smiling, stopped talking. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. This was power. Not the kind you could see, but the kind you could feel. The kind that bent the world around it. Salvatore turned his attention back to me. "Tell me about your family, Elena." A normal question, a dinner party question. But I understood now that nothing in this house was normal. "I don't have one," I said. "Not anymore." "Where are they?" "Gone." "Dead?" he asked gently. "Some of them." He nodded like this made sense. Like losing a family was just something that happened to people like me. "I'm sorry." Giulia was watching this exchange intently. Marco was focused on his pasta, but his ears were tracking everything. "Why are you being so nice to me?" I asked abruptly. Salvatore set his fork down. He took a sip of wine. He looked directly at me, and in that look was something that made my heart stop. "Because," he said slowly, "you saw my children, and you chose to help them. You could have walked away. You were a stranger. You had no obligation, but you chose to help them. So, he said, most people in my life choose based on what they can gain, what they can take, what position it will give them. You chose based on need, based on goodness. That's rare enough to be worth something." "Worth what?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached for his water glass, and as he did, his sleeve rode up. His wrist and forearm were covered in scars, old scars, the kind that told a story of violence spanning decades. I stared at them, and he let me stare. He didn't pull his sleeve down. He sat there, exposed, letting me catalog the evidence of his past. "You know what these are," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "You know what I am?" "Yes." "And yet you're still here." "Yes," I said, and I realized I was frightened of my own honesty, frightened of how little it mattered. After dinner, Salvatore showed me to a guest room on the second floor. The hallway was lined with photographs Giulia and Marco at various ages. Salvatore and a woman I assumed was their mother. She was beautiful, laughing in most of the photos, and then the photos ended abruptly, the way grief works. The family stopped being photographed. "Her name was Lucia," Salvatore said, noticing where my eyes had landed. "She was the good part of me, the part you're trying to preserve," I said. "Yes." The guest room was larger than the shelter's entire common area. A 4-poster bed, an ensuite bathroom with heated floors and rainfall showerhead, fresh clothes laid out on the bedclothes that fit me perfectly, which should have been impossible since Salvatore barely knew my size. "There's a phone if you need to call anyone," he said from the doorway. "If you need anything." "Why are you keeping me here?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Giulia told me something in the car, something she said in Italian so you wouldn't understand." "What did she say?" "She said that you looked like you were drowning, and that I should save you. She said that's what our family does." Something cracked open in my chest. "She just met me." "Yes," he said. "But my daughter sees things. She sees souls. She saw something in you worth saving." "And what do you see?" I asked. He stepped into the room, closed the door behind him, moved closer until I could smell him expensive cologne and something else, something like smoke and authority and danger. "I see a woman," he said, "who has been hurt so badly that she's made herself invisible. I see someone who saved my children when she had no reason to. I see someone who's asking me hard questions while standing in a room that makes most people terrified." "Should I be terrified?" I whispered. "Yes," he said. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered there, against my neck, against that soft place below my ear that hadn't been touched in so long it felt like the first time I'd ever been touched. "But not of me. Of this, of what might happen if you stay." He stepped back, left his hand still hovering in the space between us. "Sleep," he said. "Tomorrow, I'll take you to get your things. Whatever you need from the shelter. From the city, bring it here." "Why would I do that?" "Because," he said, "my daughter has decided you're part of this family. And in my house, what my children decide becomes true." He left before I could respond, closing the door quietly behind him. I stood in the center of that enormous room, in clothes that had been bought for someone who didn't exist, yet someone who belonged in a mansion, who deserved beauty, who was worth more than invisible. And I understood, with a clarity that was almost painful, that I'd crossed some kind of threshold. I could never go back to the mall, to the shelter, to the life of drift and small invisibilities, because a little girl had seen me drowning, and a man with blood on his hands had decided to save me. And the terrible, intoxicating truth was this: I wanted to be saved. 3 days later, I was living a life that didn't belong to me. The shelter had been cleared out, my possessions collected and stored by someone I never met. My absence had been explained away somehow. I didn't ask how. Salvatore's world operated on a level of efficiency that suggested questions weren't encouraged. The mansion's routines were rigid. Breakfast at 7, Salvatore and the children in the formal dining room. School preparation for Giulia and Marco, apparently homeschooled by a woman named Signora Benedetti, who had kind eyes and never asked why a homeless woman was now living in guest quarters. By day 4, I'd been moved to a bedroom on Salvatore's floor. "The guest room is too far," he'd said simply. "If you need anything during the night, I want you able to reach me. Meaning, I want you where I can see you. Meaning, this is no longer a choice you're making. This is a reality being constructed around you." I should have recognized the signs. The way conversations stopped when I entered rooms. The increased presence of men in dark suits who smelled like gun oil and leather. The locked doors appearing on the second floor. The safe room, which Salvatore showed me on day 5. In case you ever need to hide quickly. On day 6, a man with a broken nose delivered flowers. "From the Carmine family," the florist said, his voice carefully neutral. "Congratulations on your engagement." "We weren't engaged. There's been a mistake," I said. But Salvatore was already there, taking the flowers from the delivery man's hands. "No mistake," he said quietly. He tipped the man, dismissed him, turned to me with an expression that was carefully blank. "Come with me." The study was on the 3rd floor. I'd never been here before. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a desk that looked like it weighed half a ton, and on the wall behind it, a safe that was probably older than I was. "The Carmine family has a daughter," Salvatore said, pouring himself a drink he didn't drink, "named Valentina. She's been promised to me for years. Her father is using this as a way to remind me of our arrangement." "An arrangement?" "A business merger," he said. "Of sorts. Her family controls the ports. My family controls the inland routes. Together, we're unstoppable. Separately, we're both vulnerable." "You're talking about organized crime," I said flatly. "I'm talking about my reality," he corrected. "The one I've built. The one that's kept Julia and Marco safe and fed and educated while their mother died of cancer." I wanted to be angry. I wanted to feel the moral clarity of judgment. But all I could see was that young man in his face, the one who'd held his children like they might dissolve, the one who'd chosen ruthlessness not for power, but for survival. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now I tell the Carmine family that I'm no longer available for their daughter." "Just like that?" "No," he said quietly. "Not just like that. I tell them that I'm taking a wife instead, someone unexpected, someone who will serve as a more interesting barrier." The room tilted slightly. "You want to marry me? I want to protect you," he said. "And I want my daughter to have her way. She's very insistent that you belong here. People will know I'm a shelter case. They will see what I present them with," Salvatore said. "A woman of mystery. A woman who survived something unspeakable and was brave enough to help my children. They will see exactly what I want them to see." I thought about the clothes that had been waiting in the guest room, the hair appointments, the woman who'd come to teach me to walk differently, more slowly, more deliberately, as if my body took up space worth respecting, the elocution lessons disguised as conversation. I'd been being reconstructed this entire time. "I don't love you," I said. "No," he agreed. "Not yet. But you will. People who are saved often love their saviors. It's human nature. That's not love. That's gratitude." "At first," he said. "But I'm patient, and I can wait for the rest." There was a knock. A man entered, one of the ones with careful eyes and careful distance. He whispered something to Salvatore that made his jaw clench. "What is it?" I asked. "The Carmine family is making a move," he said. "My rival, Marco Benedetto, no relation to Signora, is trying to move into our territory. They're making it personal." "Meaning?" "Meaning someone will probably die," Salvatore said calmly. "Probably several someones. And that's going to happen regardless of whether you marry me or not. But if you marry me, at least you'll have the protection of my name. At least my enemies will think twice before trying to reach you." He pulled out the notebook he'd been carrying since the mall. The leather one. He opened it and I saw page after page of my details. What I'd worn, the way I moved, the scent of my hair, the precise moment I'd knelt down in front of his children, the way I'd looked at them. He'd been documenting me, building a file, constructing me into something concrete. "This is insane," I whispered. "Yes," he said. "But it's also the only way forward that keeps you alive. Because if you're not mine, if you don't have my protection, then the Carmine family will use you to hurt me. And if there's one thing I cannot survive, it's that." There was pain in his voice. Real pain. The kind that made me understand that for all his power, all his control, there was a desperate loneliness underneath it. A man who'd loved once and lost her. A man who was now trying to construct someone to fill that void. "I'll need time," I said. "You have 48 hours," he said. "After that, The announcement goes to the papers, whether you agree or not. This isn't a negotiation, Elena. It's a courtesy. Outside, the rain had started again. The city beyond the windows looked dark and hungry and very far away. I realized, with a kind of sick certainty, that I couldn't go back to that city, even if I wanted to. I belonged to Salvatore Russo now. Had from the moment I'd knelt down in front of his children. I had simply needed him to say it out loud for me to understand. The wedding dress was white. I hadn't chosen white. Salvatore had chosen white. Salvatore had chosen everything. The dress, the flowers, no Carmine family arrangements. He'd made that clear. The venue, a private chapel on the estate. The guest list, 73 people, all of whom I didn't know. Signora Benedetti was fastening buttons up the back of the dress when I finally broke down. I don't know him, I said. I've known him for less than 2 weeks. No, Signora Benedetti agreed, her wrinkled hands careful against the fabric. But he knows you. That's what matters in his world. What world is that exactly? She was quiet for a moment. The world where love is not required, where loyalty is currency, where survival is the only goal that matters. That's not a world. That's hell. Perhaps, she said. But it's the world your children will be safe in now. Salvatore doesn't protect what's merely convenient. He protects what's his. I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back was someone else. Someone beautiful in a way that didn't belong to me. Someone who'd been made by a man with very specific ideas about what his future should contain. Julia appeared in the doorway. She was wearing a pale pink dress, her dark hair curled in ringlets. She looked like a doll someone had very carefully constructed. Papa wants to see you, she said. Before what? Before everything changes. The study was darker than I remembered. Salvatore stood by the window, wearing a suit that was clearly Italian-made, clearly expensive. His dark hair was slicked back. His silver temples caught the light. You look beautiful, he said without turning around. I look like your creation. He turned then. And the expression on his face was something I hadn't seen before. Vulnerability. Actual, unguarded vulnerability. Is that such a bad thing? He asked quietly. To be created by someone who values you? I was a person before you found me. No, he said. You were a ghost. A woman who'd learned to take up no space. I've simply made you solid. He approached me slowly. Like I was something that might bolt. Like the beautiful dress was the only thing keeping me tethered to this moment. I don't know how to be what you need, I said. You already are, he said. Just by being here. Just by saying yes. He cupped my face in his hands. His thumbs traced my cheekbones. In the hallway, I could hear Julia singing softly. Marco playing with something wooden and loud. I'm going to tell you something, Salvatore said. And I need you to believe me. If I could give you a choice, a real choice, I would. But I can't. My enemies are circling. Valentina Carmine's engagement to me was supposed to be announced today. Instead, I'm marrying a woman who showed up 2 weeks ago and already seems to be tearing my entire operation apart just by existing. What does that mean? It means, he said, that 3 men died last night. 2 of mine, 1 of theirs. It means that everyone is watching to see if I'm weak, if I'm capable of making mistakes, if marrying you is a mistake or a masterstroke. What is it? He kissed me then. Not gently. Not the way a man kisses a woman he's just met. The way a man kisses a lifeline. The way a drowning person holds onto wreckage. His hands pulled me closer, until there was no space between our bodies. My dress, so carefully tailored, crushed against his suit. His mouth was warm and tasted like whiskey in desperation. When he pulled back, his eyes were slightly unfocused, like he'd just woken from something. It's the only move I have, he said quietly. Marry me. Have my name. Make everyone believe you're not a weakness but a strength. Make them believe I'm a man so secure in what he has that he can choose unconventional beauty over political advantage. Is that what I am? You're everything, he said. That's the problem. That's why I can't let you go. The ceremony took 20 minutes. We stood in the chapel's stone walls, candles, the echo of every vow ringing like it mattered. Salvatore's hand was steady when he placed the ring on my finger. A diamond so large it seemed to refract light in shades of blue and purple, and something close to silver. I, Salvatore Russo, take thee, Elena Rossi. But I wasn't Elena Rossi anymore. I was Elena Russo. The name sat in my mouth like something foreign. Something that belonged to someone else. To be my wife, my partner, My responsibility, for as long as we both shall live. The priest nodded. I said my vows. They sounded like someone else saying them. They sounded like a woman who believed in permanence, in connection, in the possibility of love. Julia threw flower petals. Marco clapped loudly. And then we were alone in the car, the same black car that had brought me from the mall. Salvatore sat on one side. I sat on the other, a careful distance of space between us. We should consummate the marriage, he said flatly. For the appearance. For everyone who'll be waiting for confirmation. Is that a proposal? It's a reality. Tomorrow, everyone will be watching for signs that you're truly mine. That this isn't some elaborate game. And if I say no, then I'll take no for an answer. And they'll know I'm weaker than I was this morning. He was using me. Had been using me from the beginning. And yet, when he held out his hand, I took it. His grip was warm, solid. The grip of a man who'd been drowning in loneliness long before I arrived. The grip of a man who'd built an empire out of violence and was now trying to build something else out of whatever I was. I need you to understand something, he said quietly, his thumb stroking the back of my hand. I will kill to protect you. I will destroy anyone who threatens you. But I will never lie to you. Not after this moment. Everything between us from now on is truth. Even if the truth is that you're a criminal, even if the truth is that I'm the worst thing that ever happened to you, he said. Yes. The mansion was lit up like a fortress when we arrived. Men everywhere, watching, waiting, calculating. Salvatore guided me upstairs, through hallways that suddenly felt like they belonged to me, to us, to something we'd just created together. And when he closed the bedroom door behind us, when he looked at me with those dark eyes that had seen too much violence to ever be entirely soft, I understood something fundamental. I was no longer myself. I was no longer that invisible woman from the mall. I was Salvatore Russo's wife, which meant I was now valuable, precious, protected, which meant I was also trapped. The newspapers called us romantic. Mysterious woman saves Mafia boss's children, becomes his bride, the headline read. The story they told was safe, digestible, a modern fairy tale with just enough danger to be interesting. No one mentioned that I'd been homeless. No one mentioned that I had no family to invite. No one mentioned that I'd had exactly 2 weeks to know this man, before promising forever to him. Salvatore had constructed my narrative with the same precision he'd used to construct my wardrobe, but the crack came on day 23. I was in the library, the actual library, not the study with the safe when I found them. Photographs, dozens of them, hidden in a leather portfolio behind a row of books about Italian history. The first photograph showed Lucia. She was laughing, her head thrown back, sunlight catching the gold in her hair. The second showed her in a hospital bed, tubes running from her arms, her hair gone. The third was her funeral, but the ones that made me sick were different. They showed Salvatore, younger but not young, standing next to a woman in a nightclub, standing next to her at an outdoor cafe, standing next to her in what looked like a hotel room. The woman was not Lucia. Then came photographs of Lucia and Salvatore in happier times, their wedding, a pregnancy announcement, the twins being born, and interspersed throughout were moments I recognized, small, careful distances in their eyes, the kind of distance that spoke of affairs and betrayals, and the slow erosion of love. You found them. Salvatore was in the doorway. I hadn't heard him come in. That's the problem with living with someone. They learn where you hide. You were unfaithful, I said. And it was stupid because of course he was. Of course a man like Salvatore Russo, with all his power and his darkness, would have been unfaithful to his wife. But I'd built a narrative in my head, a story where Lucia was the light that kept him tethered to goodness. Yes, he said simply. I was. Many times. 3, he said, that I'm ashamed of. I wanted to throw the photographs at him. But instead, I just held them, feeling the weight of them in my hands. Why are you showing me this? Why do you keep these? Because, he said, I needed to remember what happens when you try to be someone you're not. Lucia needed me to be capable of fidelity, capable of being a normal man. I spent years trying, and every time I failed, every time my nature reasserted itself, I broke something in her. He sat on the arm of the leather chair. For a moment, he looked exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with age. She got cancer, he said, and I think part of me was relieved. Not for her, never for her, but because it meant I could finally stop pretending. That's horrible. Yes, he agreed. It is. I wanted to leave the library, but I was beginning to understand that leaving rooms was becoming harder in this house. that there were invisible boundaries I was crossing without knowing their coordinates. "I've been trying to be different with you," Salvatore continued. "I've been trying because Giulia begged me to be, because Marco asked me, in Italian, if you would stay, if I kept hurting people." "What did you tell him?" "I told him the truth, that some things can't be changed, that I am who I am, and the kindest thing I can do is be honest about it." He stood and walked to the window. The garden was coming into spring. Flowers were blooming in careful, arranged patterns. Everything beautiful and controlled and slightly suffocating. "I had a man shot last week," he said conversationally. "He was skimming money from the Bronx operations. I had him shot in the knees first, to make it clear why he was dying, then in the chest, then once more, in the head." I felt the color drain from my face. "I'm telling you this," Salvatore said, "because you're my wife now, and my wife deserves to know who she's married to. Not the man I'm trying to be, the man I actually am." "Why would you tell me this?" He turned to face me. His expression was almost gentle. "Because I'm in love with you, Elena, and that love is making me weak. And weakness is what gets people killed in my world. So I'm going to tell you the worst parts of me, one by one, and I'm going to need you to hear them, to accept them, to love me anyway, or to leave." "You won't let me leave." "No," he said. "But I need you to make the choice to stay, despite that. I need you to choose me knowing exactly what I am." My hands were shaking. I set the photographs down very carefully on the table. "Why did you really bring me here?" I asked. "The actual reason, not the story about Giulia seeing something in me. Not the story about needing protection from the Carmine family." He was quiet for a long time, long enough that I thought he might not answer. "Because," he finally said, "when you were kneeling in front of my children, looking at them with such tenderness, I saw something I thought Lucia had taken with her when she died. I saw goodness. Real, uncalculated goodness, and I was desperate enough to reach for it, thinking maybe if I held it close enough, I could absorb it. Maybe I could become the man I wanted to be. By trapping me here, by trusting that you would choose to stay," he said. "There's no lock on your room, Elena. There's never been a lock. You could have left any day. Called the police. Told them the truth about where you came from, about the homeless shelter, about how a Mafia boss found you and married you. You could have destroyed everything. I thought about it then. About the moments where I could have left. The unlocked doors, the phones, the opportunities to slip away during the day when Salvatore was in meetings. And I realized, with a certainty that was almost painful, that I hadn't left because I didn't want to. I'm in love with you too, I said, and the words tasted like betrayal of myself. I hate it. I hate that I am, but I am. He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet. Thank God, he whispered. He pulled me into his arms, and I let myself be held. I let myself feel the solidity of him, the warmth, the terrible, intoxicating safety of being wanted this much. I'm going to hurt you, he said into my hair. Not intentionally, but I will. I know, I said. And you'll stay anyway? Yes, I said, and I meant it. That's when the first bullet came through the window. The glass shattered in a sound like crystal breaking underwater. Salvatore was on me in seconds, his body covering mine, his hands pulling me down behind the couch. More bullets followed, 3, 4, 5, in rapid succession. The photographs scattered across the floor, Lucia's face staring upward as the world went to war. Stay down, Salvatore hissed. He was moving already, pulling a gun from somewhere I hadn't known existed. His movements were precise, practiced. This was a version of him I hadn't seen before. Not the vulnerable man who'd been talking about his failures, but the thing underneath, the violence, the actual criminal. Someone was shooting at us from the garden. I could hear footsteps in the hallway, men shouting in Italian, the distinct sound of guns being readied. This was what his world looked like when it collided with itself. This was what lay underneath the expensive suits and the thoughtful silences. Stay in this room, Salvatore said, and he was already moving toward the door. Don't come out for anyone but me. Not Giulia, not Marco, not Signora Benedetti. No one but me. Don't go, I said, but he was already gone. The shots continued for what felt like forever but was probably 3 minutes. The library became a shooting gallery. Books were destroyed. The leather chairs were shredded. I huddled behind the couch, listening to the screams, listening to the violence, understanding finally what it meant to be married to this man. Then, Silence. Not the silence of the danger being over, but the silence of whoever was outside giving up, or being killed, or running. I stayed where I was. My hands were shaking. My breath was coming in short, panicked gasps. I had left homelessness, left the shelter, left invisibility, to come here. To this. Salvatore returned after 10 minutes. He was covered in blood. "It's not mine," he said before I could scream. "Not most of it." "Who?" "Benedetto. The rival I mentioned. He just declared war." He pulled me up, guided me out of the library, down the hallway. Giulia and Marco were in the safe room with Signora Benedetti, looking terrified in a way that suggested this was not their first time hiding from violence. "Are you hurt?" Salvatore asked them, and they shook their heads. "Papa," Giulia said, and her voice was steady despite her fear. "You promised we would be safe here. You promised Elena would keep us safe." The accusation in her voice cut deeper than the bullets. "We are safe," Salvatore said. But his eyes had gone dark. "Benedetto made a mistake." "Did he?" I heard myself say. Everyone turned to look at me. "What?" Salvatore asked quietly. "Did he make a mistake? Or did you?" I was shaking, but the words kept coming. "You brought me here. You married me. You told me about Lucia, about your affairs, about the man you had shot. And suddenly Benedetto attacks? Seems less like a mistake and more like perfect timing." Understanding crashed over me, cold and terrible. "You wanted him to attack. You wanted him to see that you were weak. You wanted to draw him out." Salvatore's face was completely still. "Elena, I'm bait," I said. "I've always been bait. That's my only value to you. It's not that I saved your children. It's that I'm unexpected enough to be interesting, vulnerable enough to be used, poor enough that if I disappear, no one will ask questions. That's not true, isn't it?" I was crying now, my voice rising. "Tell me the truth. Did you plan this? Did you know Benedetto would come after me?" "No," he said quietly. "I didn't know, but I knew it was a possibility." The admission hit like a physical blow. "And you married me anyway?" "Yes," he said. "Because I'm a coward. Because I'm in love with you, and I was terrified you would leave. So I tied you to myself with every weapon I had available, by putting me in danger, by trusting that you were strong enough to survive it." I laughed, a sound that was almost hysteria. "I was homeless, Salvatore. I was invisible and broken, and you took that brokenness and built a palace around it. But it's still a prison." Giulia was watching me with those old eyes, those eyes that saw too much. "Elena," she said quietly, "Papa loves you." "I know," I said, "and that's the problem. Because his love is suffocation. His love is using people he claims to care about. His love is violence, disguised as protection." I walked toward the door of the safe room. "Where are you going?" Salvatore asked. "Away. If you leave this room, I can't protect you." "I know," I said. "That's the only reason I'm going." But I stopped at the doorway. Because Salvatore was holding his gun loosely at his side, and his hand was shaking, and his eyes were the eyes of a man who just realized that love could destroy you faster than bullets ever could. "I want to hate you," I said. "I want to be angry enough to leave and never come back. But I'm not." "Then stay," he said. "But you have to change. Actually change. Not just tell the children that you'll be better. Not just try to be decent for a few weeks, and then slide back into violence. You have to actually become someone different." "I don't know how," he said, and the honesty in his voice was devastating. "Neither do I said. "But we're going to have to figure it out. Because I'm going to need you to be the man you're trying to be, and you're going to have to need me to be the woman I'm becoming. And somewhere in the middle of all that, maybe we'll accidentally build something real." He moved toward me, and I didn't move away. He pulled me against him, and I let him hold me. "I'm sorry," he said into my hair. "For all of it. For the manipulation, for the danger, for making you into something you didn't choose to be." "I did choose it," I said. "That's what makes this so complicated." Outside, the sound of cleanup had begun. Men were collecting bodies. Broken glass was being swept. The violence was being erased, as if it had never happened. And I understood, in that moment, that this was my life now. This was what loving Salvatore Russo meant, bearing witness to beauty and brutality in equal measure. It meant choosing to stay anyway. It meant becoming someone I didn't recognize, and calling it love. They brought Benedetto to the mansion. He was alive, barely. His face was a roadmap of broken bones. His left arm hung at an angle that suggested it had been broken in at least 3 places. But his eyes were still defiant, still burning with the kind of hatred that doesn't die even when everything else breaks. I was in the hallway when they carried him past. Salvatore was behind me, his hand on my shoulder, grounding me to this moment. "You don't have to watch," he said quietly. "I think I do," I said. "I think I need to see what I've chosen to be part of." The interrogation room was in the basement. I'd known about it. Everyone in the mansion knew about it, but knowing about it in the abstract and actually descending those stairs to find it were 2 different things. The room was clean, professionally clean. Concrete floors, drains, lights that were very, very bright, and in the center, a chair that was bolted to the floor. They'd strapped Benedetto into it. Salvatore dismissed everyone except one man, the scarred one, the driver. The scarred man positioned himself by the door like he was there to prevent escape, though we all knew that wasn't the actual reason. "I'm going to ask you 3 times, Salvatore said, his voice so calm it was almost conversational. "If you lie to me even once, I'm going to hurt you in ways that will make you wish I'd killed you in the library." "Go to hell," Benedetto spat. Salvatore nodded to the scarred man, who produced a knife. Not a dramatic knife, just a regular kitchen knife, the kind you'd use to cut bread. What happened next was quick, efficient. The scarred man cut Benedetto's hand across the palm, deep enough to draw blood but not deep enough to sever anything vital. Benedetto screamed. It was a sound that didn't sound human. I realized I was holding Salvatore's hand. When I looked down, our fingers were intertwined like we'd been married for decades, instead of days. Like this was normal. Like we were a team. "Why did you attack tonight?" Salvatore asked Benedetto, stepping over to wipe blood from his suit jacket. "Because you're weak," Benedetto gasped. "You married a ghost. A homeless woman. You showed them all that you're vulnerable." "Who's them?" Salvatore asked. "The families. The organizations. Everyone who's been waiting for you to slip." Salvatore gestured. The knife came out again. This time it was used on Benedetto's other hand. More screaming. More blood. I should have been horrified. Should have been sick. Should have run. Instead, I was cold. Ice cold. Because I understood, finally, what Salvatore had been trying to tell me. His world didn't allow for mercy. His world didn't allow for gentleness or negotiation. His world was violence, and violence was the only language it spoke. "Who sent you?" Salvatore asked. Benedetto was sobbing now, his breathing in ragged gasps. "The Carmine family, Valentina's father. He said you'd betrayed them by marrying someone else. He said you needed to be reminded of the cost of disloyalty." The information came out in pieces, intercut with screams, intercut with the wet sounds of violence. When it was done, when Salvatore had all the information he needed, he gestured to the scarred man, who produced a gun, a small one, a handgun that looked almost delicate in his large hand. "I'm going to let you choose," Salvatore said, "how this ends. Quickly, if you tell me you deserve to die, or slowly, if you want to beg." Benedetto looked at the gun, looked at Salvatore, and then his eyes found me. "Your wife," he said. "She made you soft. She made you stupid. She's going to be the thing that destroys you." Salvatore's hand tightened on my shoulder. I felt him tense, but he didn't move. Instead, he leaned down and whispered something in Benedetto's ear. I couldn't hear it, but I could see Benedetto's face go white. Whatever Salvatore said, it was worse than the knife. Worse than the bullets. Worse than death. The gun fired once. Benedetto's head fell forward, dead. The scarred man began cleaning immediately, moving with the efficiency of someone who'd done this many times. Concrete floors really are practical, I thought distantly. Easy to hose down. Salvatore pulled me out of the basement. We didn't speak until we reached the bedroom. His bedroom. Our bedroom now. He went straight to the shower, stripping off his clothes that were spotted with blood. The water ran red before it ran clear. I stood in the doorway and watched him wash away the evidence of violence like it was just another part of his day. When he emerged, he was wrapping a towel around his waist. His chest was scarred thin, pale lines that crisscrossed his sternum and ribs. More violence, written on his skin in the language of survival. "I killed a man tonight," he said flatly, "in front of you, to teach you something." "What did you teach me?" "That I'm exactly what everyone says I am. That I'm a monster. That you should have run when you had the chance." I stepped into the bathroom, closed the door. I was shaking so badly I could barely stand. This was the moment. This was the moment where I could still leave. Where I could still be the strong woman who'd survived homelessness and rejection and invisibility, where I could choose survival over this slow, beautiful drowning. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked at the woman Salvatore had created, the woman in the expensive dress, the woman with the perfect hair and the manicured nails, the woman who'd become a wife instead of a ghost. And I realized I didn't want to be that other Elena anymore, the invisible one, the one who was small enough to fit in the spaces between other people's lives. I wanted to be this version, the wife of a mafia boss, the woman who'd looked at violence and didn't flinch. I wanted to be the thing that could match him. I came out of the bathroom and found Salvatore sitting on the edge of the bed, still wrapped in the towel. He looked broken. Utterly broken. I sat beside him. "Tell me what you whispered to him," I said. He was quiet for a long moment. "I told him that I was going to let him live long enough to watch me love you, that I was going to spend the rest of my life with you, happy and safe and completely, entirely mine, and that his failure would haunt him every moment of whatever time was left. But you killed him." "Yes," Salvatore said, "because he didn't deserve even that mercy." I leaned against him. His arm came around me automatically. "I want to change," he said quietly. "For you, for Julia and Marco, for the small part of me that still remembers what it felt like to be human. But I don't know how to stop being this." "Maybe," I said, "you don't have to stop. Maybe you just have to redirect it. Channel it into something other than destruction." "Like what?" "Like protecting us," I said. "Like building something that lasts. Like becoming a man your daughter can be proud of." He pulled me against his chest. And in that moment, covered in the water from his shower, surrounded by the echoes of violence, I understood what love meant in his world. It meant being complicit. It meant witnessing. It meant choosing to stay anyway. And I'd made that choice. Over and over, I kept making it. The agreement with the Carmine family took 2 weeks to negotiate. Salvatore didn't kill Valentina's father. That surprised me. Instead, he made something worse. He made a deal. Valentina would marry a minor boss in Salvatore's organization, securing the alliance but on his terms. The Carmine family would acknowledge Salvatore's marriage to me as legitimate. No future challenges, no future vendettas. In exchange, Salvatore would allow the Carmines control of certain territories. A sacrifice that I understood cost him in ways that had nothing to do with money. "You gave them what they wanted," I said when he told me. "I gave them what I could afford to give," he corrected. "What I couldn't afford to give was you." We were in the garden. Spring had turned to early summer, and the flowers were blooming in careful, arranged patterns. Julia and Marco were being taught Italian by a tutor under the shade of an old oak tree. They looked happy. Normal. As normal as children could look when their father was a criminal. "The Carmine family wanted me dead," Salvatore continued. "They wanted to make a statement. Instead, they're getting a better alliance and keeping their pride. That's not me being weak. That's me being smart." "Is it also you being changed?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I didn't kill today. I gave myself that goal one day, where I wouldn't kill anyone, and I achieved it. That shouldn't be a victory." "No," he agreed. "But in my world, it is." He was different. Slowly, incrementally, he was becoming someone else. Not good, I wouldn't pretend he was good, but less consumed by violence, less apt to reach for the gun when negotiation would serve better. Signora Benedetti said it was because he was in love. She was teaching me to cook one afternoon when she mentioned it, her wrinkled hands guiding mine as we prepared risotto, the way she'd been teaching me things since the day I arrived. "Love changes men like Salvatore," she said in her accented English. "It doesn't make them good, but it makes them want to be better. That's the beginning of change." "Do you think he can actually change? Or is this just temporary?" "I think," Signora Benedetti said carefully, "that everyone is capable of change if they're given a reason to. Your husband has been given a reason. Now it's your job to make sure he doesn't lose sight of it." That night, Salvatore came to bed smelling like rain in the garden and something that was uniquely him. He pulled me close without speaking, and I felt the tension in his body ease as he held me. "I love you," he said. "I want to make sure you know that. Not because I'm afraid you'll leave, but because you deserve to hear it. And I don't say things I don't mean." "I know," I said. "Do you love me?" It was a question I'd been avoiding in my own mind. Love. Such a small word for such a dangerous emotion. "Yes," I said. "I do. Against my better judgment, and all evidence of common sense. I love you." He made love to me then. Not roughly, though Salvatore had that capacity. He was gentle, careful, like he was trying to prove something with his touch, that he could be tender, that violence wasn't his only language. His hands traced the pathways of my body like they were drawing maps. His mouth found the places I didn't know were sensitive, and when he entered me, it was slow and deliberate, a kind of worship that made me understand why people could mistake obsession for love. Afterward, we lay tangled together, and he told me stories about Lucia, about their wedding day when he'd been so nervous he'd dropped the rings, about Marco's birth, when Salvatore had wept in the hospital bathroom because he'd been so terrified of breaking something so small. I wasn't always what I am now, he said. I had a choice, once. I could have stayed legitimate, built businesses the legal way. My father gave me that choice. Why didn't you take it? Because legitimate never pays fast enough, never gives you enough control. And I needed control more than I needed goodness. And now? Now, he said. I'm not sure. I still need control. But maybe not at the expense of everything else. We made love again, slower this time. And in the darkness, I felt the barriers between us thin. The wall he'd built to keep the violence separate from the rest of his life began to crumble. By morning, something had shifted. Salvatore was different, quieter. There was a sadness in him that hadn't been there before, or perhaps that had always been there and I was only now seeing it. I want to leave, he said suddenly. I thought I'd misheard him. What? Not the family, not the business, but the violence. I want to pass it to someone else. You can't, I said, understanding the impossibility even as he was speaking it. You're in too deep. This is your life. I know, he said. But I want to try anyway. For Marco, for Julia, for you. What would that even look like? It would look like me teaching someone else to be the violence. It would look like me stepping back. It would look like me becoming something that's not what I am. You can't change who you are. No, he said. But maybe I can change what I do with it. That afternoon, Salvatore called a meeting. All the bosses came. The men who'd been his lieutenants. The men who answered to him. They sat in the study while I stayed in the hallway, listening through the door like a ghost. I'm going to be stepping back, Salvatore announced. I'm going to hand operations to Carmine. He'll be the public face of the organization. You're retiring? Someone asked, shocked. No, Salvatore said. I'm evolving. There's a difference. The meeting went well, considering. Salvatore had always been respected enough that they didn't question his decision. They questioned it anyway, but quietly. By evening, it was done. Officially, Salvatore Russo was no longer the boss. Unofficially, everyone knew he still held all the power. But there was a difference between the two things, and he understood that too. That night, we lay together, and he finally seemed to breathe properly. We can have a real life now, he whispered against my hair. Maybe not normal, but real. Yes, I said. Stay with me. Stay with me forever. I'm not going anywhere, I said, and meant it. Outside, the city hummed with its endless violence. But inside the mansion, inside the circle of his arms, there was something that felt like peace. It wouldn't last. Peace never does in worlds like this. But for this moment, on this night, we had something close to it. And sometimes, that has to be enough. 3 months later, Julia got sick. Not seriously sick. Just a fever that wouldn't break. Just a cough that persisted. Just something that sent Salvatore into a panic I'd never seen before. He was in the study, making calls, his voice moving between Italian and English, with the precision of someone trying to solve an unsolvable problem. I found him at 2 a.m, surrounded by medical files and contact information for specialists. She's fine, I said quietly. It's just a cold. It's not just a cold, he said. It's cancer. It's the thing that took Lucia. It's the thing that's going to take her. I understood then what I'd been missing. Salvatore's obsession with protecting his children wasn't just about love. It was about guilt. About the fact that he couldn't save Lucia. About the way her death had rewritten his entire world. I won't let it, he said fiercely. I won't let her die. You can't control death, Salvatore. Watch me, he said. He did try. He brought in specialists from around the world. He paid for experimental treatments. He sat by Julia's bedside for hours, reading to her, talking to her, keeping her connected to the world, while her fever raged, and she recovered. It took 2 weeks. Her fever broke on day 14. The cough disappeared by day 16. By day 20, she was back to her usual self, serious-eyed and ancient, in a way that had nothing to do with her actual age. Salvatore collapsed after that, just completely broke down, crying in the hallway like the house had been his and now it was burning. I found him and held him, and he sobbed against me like he'd been holding this grief in for years. Because he had. Since Lucia died, since he'd realized his power couldn't protect the people he loved, she was sick, he kept repeating. She was sick and I couldn't fix it. But she got better, I said. You kept her alive. I got lucky, he said. That's not the same thing. When he finally pulled himself together, something was different. He was lighter somehow, like he'd been carrying something and finally set it down. I'm going to retire, he said quietly. Actually retire, not step back. Actually leave. Can you? I'm going to try, he said. For her, for Marco, for you. The transition took time. Salvatore spent months teaching Carmine everything, walking him through the operations, making introductions, ensuring that the shift in power wouldn't create a power vacuum that would destabilize everything. But slowly, incrementally, he extracted himself. The men in the mansion began to leave. The meetings stopped. The phones that had been constantly ringing quieted. The mansion, which had been a fortress, became a house. It was strange being in that house without the constant tension, without the underlying threat, without the knowledge that violence was just an elevator ride away. I didn't realize how much I'd been living in fear until the fear went away. 6 months after Giulia's illness, Salvatore signed the papers that officially transferred everything to Carmine. There was a ceremony, small, intimate, held in the study where everything had started, and then it was done. He was no longer Salvatore Russo, the Mafia boss. He was just Salvatore, a man, a father, a husband. What happens now? Marco asked as we walked through the garden that evening, the four of us together. Salvatore and me holding hands, Marco and Giulia running ahead, freed of the weight that had always surrounded their childhood. Now, Salvatore said, we figure out how to be happy. It took longer than I expected. For months, Salvatore was restless, agitated. He'd built his identity around power, around danger, around the constant negotiation between violence and control. Without it, he was unmoored. I'd find him in the study at 3 a.m, staring at nothing. I'd find him in the garden, unable to relax. I'd find him watching Giulia and Marco with an expression that was equal parts relief and terror. Relief that they were safe. Terror that without his vigilance, they wouldn't be. You have to let go. I told him one night when I found him in the hallway, staring out the window at the city beyond. I don't know how, he said. I've been holding on so tightly for so long. Then we'll figure it out together. But even as I said it, I understood the fundamental truth. He would never completely let go. Some part of him would always be the man he'd been. The man who could kill without hesitation. The man who understood violence as a primary language. The man who'd built an empire out of darkness. But that wasn't all he was anymore. Slowly, with intention and effort and occasional therapy which he was shocked to discover actually helped, Salvatore became something new. Not redeemed, never that, but transformed, or transforming. It was an ongoing process, not a destination. A year after he'd officially retired, we took the children on vacation, not to Italy, though that was the plan for eventually, but to a beach house in the Caribbean where no one knew who we were, where no one knew what Salvatore had been. He was beautiful in the sunlight. The silver in his hair caught the light. The scars on his body seemed less like marks of violence, and more like proof of survival. And when he played with Marco in the ocean, when he built sandcastles with Giulia, when he reached for my hand and held it without saying anything, I understood what the end of this story was supposed to be. Not a happy ending. Happy is too simple a word for what we'd earned. But an ending where both of us had chosen transformation, where I'd gone from invisible to essential, where he'd gone from ruthless to capable of tenderness, where a homeless woman and a mafia boss had found something in each other that they didn't know they needed. I'm sorry, he said, one night, as we lay together, the sound of the ocean outside the window. For what? For all of it. For finding you at the mall. For making you my wife. For dragging you into my world. Don't be, I said. Because if you hadn't found me, I'd still be invisible. I'd still be drowning. I'd still be a ghost. You're not a ghost anymore. No, I said. I'm Elena Russo. I'm the wife of a man who was a monster and became something close to human. I'm the stepmother of beautiful children who are going to grow up knowing that people can change. I'm the woman who chose to stay, even when she could have left. He pulled me closer. I love you, he said. I'm going to spend the rest of my life loving you. even if I'm not very good at it, even if I mess it up. I know, I said. I love you too, even knowing exactly who you are, even knowing what you've done, even knowing that the darkness doesn't completely go away. Outside, the waves crashed against the shore, the moon illuminated the water, and in that small room on that distant beach, a mafia boss and a homeless woman held each other, and it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.